So the autonomic nervous system is involuntary system. So the somatic system is voluntary system. So the physiological aspect we may classify as a somatic system and autonomic system. Somatic system is a voluntary, autonomic system is involuntary. That is functional aspect. Then we'll come to the what will be the anatomical concept of this autonomic nervous system. So it is mainly consists of visceral efferent nerves. So usually in this system, as in the part of the anatomical concept, consists of visceral efferent nerves. Then physiologically operates without conscious control. So that is autonomous or self-governing, the self-control. So that is the portion which will be taken as the autonomous or a self-governing. So the main regulating centers of this autonomic center, that is first one is the cerebral cortex, the second one is hypothalamus and medulla oblongata. So usually the cerebral cortex and hypothalamus and medulla oblongata. The hypothalamus is the main center of the autonomic system. The next is the cerebral cortex and medulla oblongata. So these three are the regulation centers of the autonomic nervous system. So this autonomic nervous system that stimulates and controls the activities. So here it is classified into two. One is a sympathetic and another one is parasympathetic. The sympathetic is stimulate or increase the activities. Then parasympathetic that decrease the activity. So the normal activities of the body increase, that is usually considered as a sympathetic system. So parasympathetic is decrease the activity, coming back to the normal is usually called as parasympathetic. So usually the organs which will be receive the both type of nerve fibers. So usually the sympathetic nerve fiber and as well as parasympathetic nerve fiber is innervation to the organs. So that is usually called as dual innervation. So these dual innervations are particularly connecting as of the organs sympathetic and parasympathetic. So just you can see here the sympathetic. What happens? This person is making a good utilization of the sympathetic system. How? So he is running. Why? Because of that the bull has followed. He had in a mind, the bull is irritating me. I have to avoid. So he is running. So due to the running, what will happen? The muscular activity is increased. Once the muscle activity is increased, automatically they need more nutrition and oxygen. So on account of that, the heart is increased its heart rate. So because to send the more blood to that muscular tissues. Then simultaneously the respiration system, because need more oxygen. On account of that, the respiration is also increased. So heart rate increased, respiration increased, muscle activity is increased, and simultaneously he had a fear, the dangerous. So on account of that, his erectile pili muscle that will be also straightened. Pili muscles that will be in the root of the hairs. So that also initiated and becomes as a hair erect. So that is muscle erection. So these are the things which will be have in a autonomic system, that is sympathetic action. So similarly here the parasympathetic. So this person is using a large meal and have in a comfortable armchair. So no any hurry, no any emergency, nothing else. So his all activities are silent. He is a normally and no any emergency, no any of the system activities not increase. So on account of that, this becomes as a autonomic nervous system, that is parasympathetic. That means he is in a resting state. So that is the point. Then what is the pathway of this autonomic system? That is usually the pathway starts from the central nervous system. That central nervous system starting with the first neuron that begins from the cortex, that is called as preganglionic neuron. That is the first neuron. Then what will happen? It will be joined to the another neuron. That joining portion is autonomic ganglia. So that is synapses between first neuron to the second neuron. Then the second neuron, that is a postganglionic neuron. So that is second neuron, that will be ends in a effector. So just that will be starting from the central nervous system, first neuron, then synapses with the second neuron. That synaptic portion is considered as an autonomic ganglion. Then second neuron that ends in the effector, that will be in organs or in the muscles, that will be considered as a effector part, that is second neuron. So here the higher control of the autonomic nervous system is hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is the higher controlling center, and it is the main center which will be controls the lower autonomic nervous system. So usually the higher center is in the brain, that is the hypothalamus, that controls the lower autonomic centers, that may be in the brain stem or it may be in the spinal cord. So usually the nuclei located in the brain stem and the spinal cord also play a vital role in the autonomic nervous system. So the main hypothalamus, that main control center that controls the lower centers, the centers in the brain stem and as well as spinal cord. So usually the nuclei located in the brain stem and the spinal cord also play a vital role in the autonomic nervous system. Now, the hypothalamus has the two centers, that means both, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic. The anterior region is stimulus and gives, that is parasympathetic system. Anterior part of the hypothalamus has a center, it is parasympathetic system. Then the posterior region, that is stimulation gives the sympathetic system. So the posteriorly there is a sympathetic center and anteriorly parasympathetic system. So in the brain stem there are the centers, that centers are vasopressure, vasodilator, cardioaccelerator, cardio-deaccelerator, and respiratory centers. So these are the autonomic centers that will be located in the brain stem, that is vasopressor, vasodilator, cardioaccelerator, and cardio-deaccelerator, and respiratory centers. So here the main centers in the brain stem region. Then again, you can see now the sympathetic system pathway, how it will be continuation. What is the pathway of the sympathetic? So first is the preganglionic neuron. That is the first neuron. That cell bodies lies in the lateral gray column of T1 to L2 or L3 segments. The cell bodies which are usually present in the lateral gray column of T1 to L2 or L3 segments of spinal cord. Then synapses at pre or para vertebral ganglion, that means in front or side of the vertebral column, that is called as paravertebral ganglia. Then autonomic ganglion. So what is that? The sympathetic trunk, the prevertebral ganglion or lateral ganglion is called as autonomic ganglia. So then postganglionic neuron. So that is second neuron. The cell bodies in the vertebral ganglia, that is prevertebral ganglion, the synapses region. In the prevertebral ganglion, then fibers are innervative their visceral effectors. So that is the autonomic nervous system. So that is sympathetic system. So how it is? Just you be remember the preganglionic neuron, that is the first neuron. Cell bodies are particularly lateral gray column of T1 to L2 or L3 segments. Then synapses at a pre or paravertebral ganglia. Then autonomic ganglion, that is the sympathetic trunk, prevertebral ganglion or lateral ganglion. Then second neuron, that is postganglionic neuron, that cell bodies in the prevertebral ganglion. Then fibers are innervative their visceral effectors. Then what about the parasympathetic system? That pathway is usually called as craniosacral division. That means the cell bodies of the first neuron, that is the preganglionic neuron, the nucleus of the cranial nerves, that particularly third cranial, seventh cranial, ninth cranial, and 10th cranial in the brain stem. So, four cranial nerves are have a name preganglionic neuron, that is first neuron. Then in the lateral gray horn of S2 to S4 segments of spinal cord. Similarly, the lateral gray horn of the S2 to S4 segments of the spinal cord. So that is why it's called as craniosacral. That means the four cranial nerves and sacral region, that is S2 to S4 segment. There it will be the cell bodies, that is the first neuron located. Then autonomic ganglia, they are called as usually terminal ganglion or intermural ganglion. So these are lies close to the effector. The effector means at the near of the organ level, that is nearer to the effector. Within the wall of the effector, almost there may be a wall of the organs effector where it will be the ear. That is the location of ganglion, that is autonomic ganglion. This is usually called as terminal ganglion or intermural ganglion. This lies close to the effector. Then second neuron, that is the postganglionic neurons. The cell bodies in the terminal ganglion near or within the visceral effector. So that is the particularly portion of second neuron that is called as postganglionic neuron. So usually the presympathetic neuron that is synapses with 4 or 5 neurons, then postsynaptic neuron that is passes to a single visceral effector. That is the point you have to be remembered. The presynaptic neuron that is mainly the related to the 4 or 5 neurons of synapses, but postsynaptic neuron passes single neuron that is to the visceral effector. So this is the pathway of the portion of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Yes. Then come to the next point. See here, in the somatic system, what will happen? So usually in the somatic nervous system, the central nervous system, this is the cell body, and this is the axon, which is covered by myelin sheath. So this neuron releases the hormone, that is a neurotransmitter, that is called as ACH, acetylcholine. So this neurotransmitter, neurohormone, that will be reaches to the skeletal muscles, that is in the peripheral nervous system. This axon and the cell body portion is in the central nervous system. This is the somatic system. Then coming to the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, how it will be happens. See in the sympathetic nervous system, so this is the cell body in the central nervous system. Then this is the peripheral, that is the axon. So here in the peripheral, so that is synapses with the second neuron. This is usually called as paravertebral or prevertebral ganglion. The synapses outside the central system, that cell body of the second neuron, that first neuron, that joint, that portion is usually called as ganglion. So here the preganglionic neuron, pre means the first neuron, that releases the ACH, that is acetylcholine. So do you remember, that is acetylcholine hormone is released by the pre-neuron. Then post neuron, that releases the NE, that is norepinephrine. So these two important hormones, that is neurotransmitters. In the sympathetic, pre-neuron releases the ACH, post-neuron releases the norepinephrine. But in the parasympathetic system, so the first neuron releases the ACH and second neuron is also releases the ACH. So here you can see the cell body in the central, then the axon, peripheral, that myelin sheath, and that will be synapses, that is terminal ganglion, then second neuron that releases the ACH and reach the effectors. So that is the portion you have to be make it the postganglionic axon, the ganglion, and preganglion, that is the pathway of sympathetic and parasympathetic, particularly as in the anatomical communications or the synapses with the other portion. So this is an important identical point anatomically, along with the hormones released by the in the sympathetic system and as well as in the parasympathetic system. So be remember. So the next point we will take it next classes, the sympathetic division and what is the parasympathetic division. So by looking up this figure, So you can take it in the left side is sympathetic division. That means the original, this starts from the T1 to L2 or L1 or L2. That is the origin of the sympathetic system. That means the cell bodies will be located in the lateral gray column of the spinal cord, that is from T1 to L1 or L2 segment. That is the sympathetic division. So the parasympathetic division, that is third cranial nerve, then seventh, ninth and 10th cranial nerve, the four cranial nerves, and plus the sacral region, that is S2 to S4, S2, S3, S4, the three sacral segment. So these will be considered as a parasympathetic system division. So this will be divided and distributed to the organ. Say for example, if you take a eye, so both innervation, so sympathetic innervation as well as parasympathetic innervation, that is the particularly through this cranial nerve courses, these ganglions are called as cranial root ganglions. So these cranial root ganglions, which is related to the third cranial celiac ganglion, pterygoperitoneal ganglion, like that there are the ganglion that is will be in related to the cranial nerve roots. Similarly, in the sympathetic also there is a ganglion, that means the synapses of that of the portion. So this is the just the idea about the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So that is the point you have to be remember of this point in related to the